Well, hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this second of our Masterworks series Concert Conversations. I'm Kai Swanson. I'm very grateful to be your host, and thanks to Chris Connolly and Wells Fargo Advisors for gracious and generous support of our series. Today is a very special day. We have two guests joining us today, and I want to get right to them. Today, we will be joined by our music director and conductor, Maestro Mark Russell Smith, and also our featured guest soloist or artist, Shellie Moore, who is Poet Laureate Emerita of the Quad Cities. And we're going to be hearing from both during the course of the program about what's a very special concert program. So I'd like to start by having a little bit of an overview on that. And Maestro Smith, tell us a little bit about your thought process behind this really fun and adventurous program.
Well, all of these pieces are based on writing, on the written word. And composers take inspiration from all sorts of things, from stories, from historical writing, from poetry, whatever. And so to kind of take four different pieces from different eras, from different inspirations, and kind of put them all together, I think is it's kind of the way, as you know, I like to program it and put things, kind of four disparate things that have a common thread. And in this case, it's the written word. There's Shakespeare, and there's Leo Leone, and there's Werner Arvey, and there's the Grimm brothers, with Hansel and Gretel. So it's about poetry, it's about fables, it's about storytelling, it's young and old. I think a nice mix of things.
Well, and you're going to be building us up. We're going to hear some things that might be familiar to some listeners. The Humperdinck,
right.
Many of us may have heard before. The Tchaikovsky Romeo and Juliet, of course. But I want to thank you because you're once again introducing us to some music that may be less familiar here, including the Michael Abels and the William Grant Still. Now we're going to hold off on the Michael Abels just for a moment.
Okay.
But tell us why the Prelude to Hansel and Gretel, is such a great way to start a concert in October.
Well, because it's really the style of music. We end with the Barn Burner with Tchaikovsky and Shakespeare, and the super famous Romeo and Juliet, and then we have two American pieces in the middle, Michael Abels and William Grant Still. And so to open, something very different than the Russian kind of inflected and the American inflected, and so something like pretty German. And, the Hansel and Gretel is just beautifully orchestrated. It's a story that, there are lots of opera companies that do this at Christmas time. And so it's arguably a kid's story. It's a little dark, with kids being put in ovens and stuff, and the Wicked Witch. And but those Grimm fairy tales are like, can be pretty dark, but we don't have to get into that. But anyway, so just the music itself is it's like the evening prayer when Hansel and Gretel are out in the woods. Just beautiful, beautiful music. And so I think a great way to just kind of say, kind of like set the kind of once upon a time idea for the whole concert.
Well, and I'm anxious to hear it again, because for me, it's been a little bit of a while, and it's a delightful piece. Now, again, as I said, we'll come back here in just a moment to the Abels, but for those of us unfamiliar with the William Grant Still poem for orchestra,
right.
Tell us a little bit about the piece and what you find attractive about it that makes you want to share it with us in the Quad Cities.
Well, William Grant Still is a great composer and really kind of the dean of African American composers. His music has been played for since the 50s and 60s, and so he has a big variety of music. To find a piece that's like specifically predicated around the written word was my challenge. He's written so much stuff, but he has based his inspiration for this piece on a Werner Arvey poem that's about kind of re-emerging, and so the idea of the theory was that COVID, we'd be like re-emerging from COVID. We are, but it's like gone a little slower than everybody has been hoping for. But it's soul sick and weary, man stands on the rim of a desolate world, and kind of putting that behind and kind of emerging is the idea of this poem. And so to have the music of one of the dean of American composers and to have that idea in the poetry of something kind of reemerging was, I mean, that's why this piece really, jumped out to me. It'll be I think it's not often played, to be honest. His symphonies are more often played and some other things. So this is a bit of a rarity, but I think a wonderful, it's lyrical, and the way he uses the orchestra is fantastic. And so it's an opportunity for all of us to get to know more of his work.
Well, and you've brought some William Grant Still to us in the past.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a great addition to that. So
right.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
A word about the Tchaikovsky. I mean, I think what's fun is if a work you think is too familiar, if you go with the right mindset, you can realize that it's very unfamiliar.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think the current conversation is interesting. I know some folks are expressing some concern that there's a remake of West Side Story, right? In the works. And I can't wait, but it's like, wait a minute, don't you remember Bernstein was just doing a remake of Romeo and Juliet?
Right.
So it's one of those stories that every iteration has legs and should, some maybe longer than others. But what is it about Tchaikovsky's application of the emotional to this great literary work that keeps it in front of audiences now?
Well, look, I mean, Tchaikovsky's like over the top, like in all the best ways, like Barn Burning. I mean, you think of 1812, you think of the symphonies. I mean, you think of just like a guy who can just like put emotions out there and get the orchestra whipped up into a frenzy. I mean, that's why people love his music, because it's like straight to the heart, and it's and certainly a story like Romeo and Juliet. I mean, just the characters he creates, the drama of a sword fight. I mean, all the kind of just action. I mean, that's totally right up his alley. And and if you want over the top, which I mean, arguably Shakespeare really isn't. I mean, there's a few more subtle, but like if you want just over the top raw emotion, I mean, Tchaikovsky's your guy. So it's a barn burner, and it's a again, I try to balance super familiar pieces and then less familiar pieces, and I think that creates a nice balance. And so this is a piece that people know, and of course it's a great big loud closer, a way to end the program. And so anyway, it's drama at its best by one of the great musical dramatists.
Well, I've just frankly been teeing up this great piece that I want to talk about with our other honored guest today, and that is Michael Abel's beautiful Frederick's Fables, adapted from the work of Leo Leone, but also we will be escorted through this lovely tale with someone I'm very fond of, Shellie Guy. As a Rock Island native, I am very grateful to have you on this stage, this very important stage, and to be with us. Before we get into the piece, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about you and your career, because I see these remarkable parallels with Leo Leone, the creator of Frederick, who had a career in a lot of different spaces before he came into children's literature. You have a children's book, and I think a second one in the works that may be coming out. And the understanding that there is an essential power to poetry and art that has been a thread through my entire acquaintance with your career. So I want to thank you and welcome you and express gratitude on behalf of the whole audience for having you here. But and I just want to mention, former poet laureate of the Quad Cities, a leader behind the Healing Waters movement and the Ebony Expressions dinner and book discussion movement, an activist in all the best senses of the word. Shellie, thank you for being with us.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit. I love the Frederick story, but I read it as a father and a grandfather. I want you to tell us about it, how you approach it as a poet, because there is some real deep poetry in this story.
Well, absolutely. When I read the first story and I continued to read, some of the pieces really reminded me of some of the African folktales with Anansi and some of the tricksters. But Anansi and those tricksters were able to balance. They were never, even though they were tricksters sometimes, they were well loved by the other creatures or the villagers, because they were very human. They were, they just had this very humanistic, and I see this in the Frederick pieces, that there's this incredible piece. The first one I read was about the mouse, encouraging everyone to understand that we have everything that we need, that we, if this might be happening, but you have this, we have, the colors, and we have everything that we need. And so those lessons and conversations are universal. And that really caught my attention. And then one of the last ones I read, of course, was where we have the protagonist, he seems to be a little lazy. And that's that correlation between Anansi and getting out of doing something that everybody else is doing, but has figured out a way to make everyone else believe that he's actually is doing this thing, until they figure it out. Hey, wait a minute, so they kind of banish you, but they let you back in, and that's life, and that's family. And so that's how I received it. And it absolutely is poetry. I really enjoyed it. Yeah. So.
Well, one of the things, and I'll get a little bit technical here, and Maestro, you're welcome in this too, but there can be challenges with being a narrator in a symphonic piece. I've only had one occasion to do it, and it was terrifying, but greatly rewarding. So tell me some of the things you're doing, because you performance is a major part of your career, right? But performance with, 50, 60 of our closest friends right behind you might be a slightly different thing. So how are you prepping for this performance?
Well, I have listened to some of the music. I am going to listen to, if I can find James Earl Jones's rendition, and was it Garrison Keillor had done it?
Yeah.
I have no problem with listening to other artists and how they interpret. So there's that. I have had some experience in reciting poetry and performing stories with musicians. So hopefully I can draw on some of that, but I think the challenge is going to be what the challenge is. And I prep, and then we rehearse. And so I'm just trusting, I'm going to trust the process. So
right. Exactly.
That's where I'm at with it.
Exactly.
And Maestro, in working pieces that include a narrator, what are some of the special challenges from your perspective?
Well, the composer's the one that either helps you or hurts you, because the composers understand, how to set up the talking, how to set up the narrator, how to, after the narration, to have the music comment on it. And so, not surprisingly, Michael Abels is a master at that. And so it's very natural, look, Shelley's right next to me, and she looks at me and I point, and she goes, and then we react. And it's really beautifully written by Michael Abels. And so it's like, I don't foresee problems at all, because of the way it just fits incredibly well. Yeah. And so every narration piece is different, and some are like easier than others to put together. But the well-written ones are like, it happens really naturally, And there's also room. Composers are smart, because you talk a little faster, then you end sooner. You talk a little slower, and so composers like give you like some vamping or some free space in case you need to catch up. They give you kind of big road markers, And so it's all. It's all kind of technical stuff that's not so super interesting, but it helps make it appear like, seamless and smooth.
Well, there is a relationship. I think it has to be established, and that's why I'm really happy that we're speaking today, because
exactly.
yeah. I was really anxious to meet you and have this conversation, because I think that you need to hear the cadence of my voice.
Right, exactly.
You
Right.
need to, you understand, and I need to hear how you feel
Right.
about working
Right.
with a narrator and all of that. Those there's a give and take, and there's sometimes there's an element of what is it, improvisation,
Right.
that you have to be ready for, and that's what you were speaking about, I think.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
And so yeah, I'm just really excited about it.
Well, and we, Kai, you know, we have a meeting set up before, like when I'm in town for the Masterworks I, we have a meeting set up to get together. So it's like a month ahead to prep, and so we can all kind of be on the same page, thinking
Right.
wise. So, you know, I mean, it's you know, we're all professionals here. You know,
That's right.
Yes.
Well,
and like I said, trusting the process.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Each experience is something totally different from the other. So, you know, yeah,
Right.
it's exciting.
Now, a little bit about the composer. Michael Abels is a great American composer, and we're very blessed that you have a connection with him, Maestro, and you guys go way back. Have you checked in with him on this work?
I have.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So, I mean, Shellie may not know this, but like we grew up together, like since second grade.
No.
Yeah, we were in elementary school together and through high school, and so yeah, and he was like, of course, a super talented musician and composer, and I was a cellist, and so we went to music camp together, and we have like a long history. So
no kidding.
Yeah, and you know, he's Uncle Mike to my kids, and you know, I mean, it's yeah. So anyway, so I mean, we have a lifelong, you know, literally since second grade relationship, and so I love his music, I love him, you know, and so Quad Cities has seen its share of Michael Abels' music because of that, and I think everybody loves his music, and kind of his more recent successes with you know, some of the great film music that he's writing, you know, I mean, it's like, anyway, so his career is just like taken off. But so I asked him, but you know, because we didn't have time to do all four, so I kind of wanted him to weigh in on like, well, which two do you think would pair the best, or what do you think? And you know, so you know, we certainly, he's aware, and you know, that we're kicking ideas around, and for him, I mean, this piece was written a long time ago. You know, there's a lot of water under the bridge in his career since then. So it's, you know, I mean, a composer writes something and then you move on to the next crisis, or the next project, or whatever, you know. So for him, it's kind of like, you know, shaking the cobwebs out to remember like how it goes in a way, you know. But anyway.
Well, that is wonderful. Just hearing about your relationship is just, that is so special, and I feel honored to be brought into that relationship.
I'm hoping he can maybe come out to the Quad Cities. We'll see, you know, for the performance.
We'd love that.
Awesome. It depends on, I mean, he's like a film composer, and so like deadlines are what they are, and so like he can never commit like too far ahead of time. But if the stars align, then maybe he'll be with us, which would be awesome.
You know, I was so excited reading his history, his bio. Such
right.
I mean, it's so rich and varied. You know, you know, in Harlem, in Florida, and you know, he's with kids. He's done it all, and then with the movie Get Out.
Right. Exactly.
To have been to establish that relationship with Jordan Peele.
Right.
It's a very special thing. And so I feel
he's Jordan Peele's He's Jordan Peele's music guy, and so that's a great. You know,
I read that. Yeah,
that's a great thing to be. You know, if you're a film composer, that's a great thing to be. So.
Right.
You know, it strikes me that communities many times our size would be very envious to have the relationship that we have with one of America's great composers, and Michael Abels, that he has come here and will surely come here again, but that also we, as a community, being able to promote and showcase artists like Michael Abels is another of a multitude of signs that the Quad Cities always punches above its weight when it comes to the arts. And so, Shellie, one of the things I wanted to ask you, because you're deeply ingrained in the art scene here, what are some other opportunities we as Quad citizens have to broaden our own horizons in the arts? Like, for instance, a lot of our fellow Quad citizens may not realize about this incredible opportunity to hear Michael Abels, but from your perspective, what are some other things that should be on our radar screen for promoting the arts and broadening our own horizons?
Well, you know, I read that, you know, you sent that thought. I wanted to think about that. And, at first, when you're so involved in something, you can draw a blank. I understand the cobwebs that you were talking about but when you're right in the middle of something and you're always doing the work, it's easy to draw a blank. But then as the couple days went by and I started thinking, so many things have happened here, great things around art in the Quad Cities, and I wouldn't know all of them. But I started thinking about, you talked about polyrhythms. And, our connection is to the cultural history, but also to jazz. And so that's just one genre but that commitment to bring in some of the best every month, every third Sunday. And, and some of the best, they could be local musicians, they could be, we do what we can. But then there's that other piece that is so important, and is that we expect every band or every group, every musician to be able to present a workshop before the actual 6 o'clock performance. We expect in your contract, it is that you present yourself as the artist and teach children, to workshop with children. Whether they're musicians, some of the children come with their instrument. Some have never played. So that's something that we've been able to. The pandemic has changed the way that looks right now, but for 14 or 15 years, that commitment to bring live musicians for adults and for children, to keep that legacy going. The work that the Mississippi Valley Blues Society does, and they do the same thing. Both organizations present artists, in residence opportunities. Quad City Arts does much of the same kind of work. They are committed to showcasing and putting these artists in front of young people so that they can see what they can do. Who can they be? And so I've been involved in those, and I guess all three of those organizations in some form or fashion. I'm one of the directors of Polyrhythms, but bringing children's book writers to, bringing just musicians or artists of all kinds. And I think that, we do punch up, we do. But we have a history of doing that. This is not new. This is not new. As a matter of fact, I was thinking, okay, so, how do we bring children to this performance in November? How does that happen? So my mind is always, we're always figuring out how to make everything generational as much as we can. However, with the Ebony Expressions dinner and book discussions that we did for several years, the idea was to, yes, we were committed to children and literacy, but at that juncture, we were more focused on adults and literacy, so that we would tell the community to read a book. And it wasn't a club, because it wasn't exclusive. It was a gathering. And so we would choose a book, and we would ask them to come on this date. After about a month, read the book, and we would have dinner, and we would discuss this book. Because the idea is that, if adults are reading, children are reading.
Yeah.
And so, but that whole artistic, it's all art. It's all art. And so I think we have a pretty good history here in this Quad Cities. And I've just mentioned just a few things.
Well, and Maestro, I think a big engine behind that is the Quad City Symphony Orchestra and its outreach programs. And
right.
As you survey the landscape of orchestral music, I'd have to say that we're, again, punching above our weight in that regard as well here in the Quad Cities.
Well, look, I mean, we are about giving great performances, but we are just as much about our educational offerings and the youth orchestra and reaching as many kids as we can, and taking musicians into schools. And I mean, all those things that we've been doing for years, just like Shellie, you know. And so there is that great history that I mean, other places don't have, or other places
absolutely
made different decisions about how to spend their money and how to spend their time. But like for us, for this organization, I mean, without doubt, I mean, yes, high quality performances and like transformational experiences are in the concert hall are super important, but like just as important is what we do for the kids in the community.
Absolutely. I was going to mention, I wanted to mention Midwest Writing Center.
Right.
Because, you know, they also actually, as a matter of fact, they published my book, How Little Billy Learned to Play, and their commitment to, you know, taking on interns and the Children Literacy Festival. But it's not just for children, it's for adults as well. I mean, these programs, I'm really, it's outstanding. There are times when I talk to people, we forget how busy we are here. We forget how much we do, because I think it's organic, it's natural. It feels natural that we do these things. And so we forget we're in this tiny little Quad Cities. And I will talk to people from bigger places, you know, bigger cities, and talk about some of the things that we have been involved in. And they have no idea what I'm talking about, because they want us to come and do these things where they live at.
Right.
And so, and that there has, we have to speak about the what is that? The people expect that these things will happen here. We've been so good at presenting artistic opportunities that, and we live in a community that welcomes it. So, you know, I have had situations where I just said, well, I have an idea, I want to do this, and that. And then you just go talk to people and they say, okay, sounds good. So people are open to new ideas, and especially around the arts. There's never been a time when I had a problem, a real problem. You know, with the right people together, we can do a lot of things.
Absolutely. Well,
and have done.
I really wish we had like twice as much time for this, but we're coming close to the end of our time. And Maestro, just any last words for our audience that you want them to be on the lookout on this concert?
No, I mean, I mean, Shellie mentioned it. Like, if there's a program where you should bring kids, and if they haven't been to a QCSO concert or an orchestra concert, I mean, this is the one.
Wonderful.
Because it's 4 shorter pieces, you know, and each one literally has its own story, with its own inspiration, and so it's like eminently approachable, but also, I mean, the music's very sophisticated, the music's super colorful. I mean, it's a program for everybody. I mean, for whatever, sophisticated, quote unquote, sophisticated listeners, for newbies, whatever. I mean, it's I think a really interesting, fun program.
Well, I, for one, am very much looking forward to it. And I'm so grateful that I had this opportunity to speak with 2 of the most creative people I think I'll ever know in my whole life, Mark Russell Smith and Shellie Guy. Again, thanks to Wells Fargo Advisors for their support of Concert Conversations, and Chris Connolly. Friends, if you don't already have your tickets for November's Masterworks concert, get to the website, give them a call, get those tickets. We want to make sure this place is rocking. Why? Well, as you can see behind me, there's a few little mice that have some lessons to teach you. And the lesson of Frederick is there are times when you just need to collect the warmth of the sun and the colors of the rainbow. And this would be a great time to do it. So friends, thank you. And I look forward to seeing you at the concerts.
Thanks.
Thank you.